Bem-vindos a esta sessão. É a primeira sessão da manhã, é a sessão de Gig Economy e Culture Hacking. Primeiro queria dar os parabéns à Microsoft pela organização. É a primeira Silent Conference onde eu estou e devo dizer que é um bocadinho estranho não ouvir o eco pela sala toda daquilo que nós estamos a dizer, mas é interessante. Nós vamos falar sobre a forma como estamos a mudar o curso do trabalho, a maneira como nós trabalhamos e nos relacionamos com as empresas, com mais flexibilidade de horários, uma cultura centrada no projeto, mais teletrabalho. A Gig Economy está de facto a fazer uma mudança enorme nas carreiras, é muito mais visível no mercado norte-americano, não há números para a Europa, ou há poucos números, não há números para Portugal, mas de facto sente-se que há muito mais freelancing, há muito mais pessoas a trabalharem sem uma ligação direta às empresas. Para falar sobre este tema, tenho comigo Susan Silbey, professora do MIT, Sarah Armond, Country Manager do LinkedIn para Portugal e Espanha, Daniel Traça, Dean da Nova School Business and Economics e o João Borga, diretor da Startup Portugal. O modelo de sessão, como penso que está definido no programa, passa por duas apresentações que são feitas pela Susan e pela Sarah, seguido de um debate com todos os participantes. Queria agora então mudar para inglês. E passo a apresentar a Susan. I'll now change to English. Susan Silbey, she's the current chair of MIT faculty and professor of sociology, anthropology, and behavioral and policy sciences in MIT. She won multiple awards. Also has written many books, and her work about governance is very inspiring. And she's also talking about regulatory and audit process, and her jobs on this area was also awarded. Susan, please, can you take the stage?
Who is a citizen? What does it mean to be a citizen? And why do so many people seek citizenship in some nations rather than others? In its simplest idea, citizenship is a form of membership. Citizenship unites people in a community to which they then belong. So what does it mean to be a member and to belong to the community? In its oldest examples, citizens were those who governed the ancient Greek city-states such as Athens, Thebes, Sparta, and Corinth. They were aged men, 20 years old, descendants of the city's elite, not women, not artisans, not foreigners, nor slaves, only those, Aristotle wrote, with the capacity to deliberate without worrying about self-interest or what they needed, those who had property and education. Over the centuries, notions of citizenship evolved. First, citizenship was offered to warriors in exchange for military service. Then it was offered to conquered peoples to be brought under Rome's jurisdiction. Then, as the monarchies of Europe developed, citizens became a word used to name the king's subjects. We all know the story, right? Eventually, the king's absolute power was checked by the emerging power of the nobles. And eventually, it was given to the peasants. They too could be citizens, to be liberated from their service. Today, we understand the citizen to be a person with a bundle of rights. Rights that protect our statuses, that allow us to live as we choose, to participate in the governing of the city, of the nation. Today, citizenship remains an aspiration for billions of people across the globe. It is desired and sought because people want to exercise power. It's a very simple power, and it's a very little power, just as it was in ancient Greece, the power to govern, to have a voice in who governs. Obviously, this is an idealized conception. Citizens do not actually govern. They ask others to govern in their name. This is also an idealized conception because citizenship is not only about being made a member and belonging, but it's about excluding. It signals exclusion. Non-citizens cannot claim the same rights and privileges. Nonetheless, citizenship is often spoken as a form of freedom, a freedom that people can enjoy within powerful states, a kind of liberty with constitutionally guaranteed legal protections. This is what millions of people have struggled for over 1,000 years, and they still struggle today. Just as citizenship's opposite, that which is slavery, has been receding from the world, citizenship has spread, probably achieving its greatest extent at this very moment in time. More people across wider swaths of the globe than ever before enjoy the rights of citizenship. Yet, at this very moment, citizenship, those legally protected freedoms and privileges to determine one's own life, is subject to more powerful and disruptive challenges, perhaps, than ever since citizenship became the foundation of the modern democratic state. And even those people who may not share in these privileges and rights, may not have the most robust portfolio of rights, they have access to a wider and more varied flow of information, of products, of services, and simply ideas and imaginaries than ever before in human history. Yet, the very same technologies, the internet, the search platforms, the social media that join people in communities across the globe also threaten to erode that very hard-won citizenship, the capacity to participate in managing the state. In my very brief remarks this morning, I want to talk to you about what it means to exercise the privileges of citizenship. I do this first by quickly identifying the problem that provokes me. That is, the challenges that are posed by our very effective digital technologies that join us in a global community. What went wrong? How did things go wrong? What should we do now? And then I will talk to you about the most popularly proposed solution, one which I even heard this morning on an earlier panel. A solution to the paradoxical situation in which we find ourselves. That is, we can repair the problems, we are told, if we become more moral, if we become more ethical, that we can control these powerful technologies if we, people like me, educate more ethical technologists, that insisting that they act as moral citizens. I want to tell you that this is banal, it is common, it is familiar, and it's not going to work. It's a very old problem, and this is a very old solution. Too often when people talk about making more moral or ethical citizens, they talk about individual decisions, and they focus on a few bad people, what I call bad apples, who have made things go bad. They've given the technology a bad name. I will offer a very different concept of ethics that is usually discussed. I will suggest that we shift our attention from bad apples to a rotting barrel, the barrel that holds the apples. So, we live today, some say, in a new world order, a new, perhaps some claim, radically new organization of time and space, of people and of things. Vast temporal, spatial, cultural distances have been bridged. Social organizations based on similarity and proximity have been transformed into functionally interdependent connections among very different and very distant peoples. Not only has the quality of our interactions changed, but at the same time, the quantity, the number, the pace of social interaction have increased geometrically. The everyday lives of the majority of people in most social classes all over the globe are constituted by more encounters of shorter duration over greater distances than ever before. This is life on the internet. On the web, worldwide sourcing, flexible production, low-cost transportation and communication form the basis of global markets, networks of both individuals and various social groups. Just as the boundaries between time and space and people are erased, so too boundaries and barriers have been loosened, not only among people and ideas, but also between banking and brokerage, between business, housing, consumer credit, among ideas. They all have been merged together. New financial instruments are created, as well as markets in these instruments, and new markets in commodities, and stocks in commodities, and funds that collect the stocks in the commodities, as well as markets in currencies and markets in debt. Time future has been discounted into time present in such fantastic and baffling ways that few people can claim to understand the way it all works. And yet, only a few, very few people need to oversee this flow of information in order to control it. In this labyrinth of innovative technologies, everything is mobile, residing nowhere other than the server farms of a few companies, ever faceless and rootless, free of the solid ground in which humans, we have no choice. Humans seek to live and have no choice but to live and to die. What went wrong? In this escalating and energetic circulation of information and exchange, the threat to citizenship, freedom, and autonomy is growing. The internet is not just a web of connections for independent people to do whatever they want, whether to seek out the history of citizenship on Wikipedia, to purchase a personally tailored suit from Vietnam, to buy specialized aromatic oils from France, or a child prostitute from Thailand, a kidney from Guatemala, or cocaine from Afghanistan. While we shop and talk and announce our support for one group or hatred for another group, Google, Amazon, Facebook, and Apple are tracking every click. We do not simply use the internet or keep track of our appointments and friends. With every click, search, and view, we supply the information for the algorithms to analyze and the platforms to sell. We citizens supply the fuel, the inputs, the raw materials of what is now a world of constant digitized surveillance. A global architecture of computer mediation produces largely uncontested new forms of power, which despite their distribution are actually quite concentrated in a hub of less than half dozen firms. This new world is constituted by unexpected and often illegible, unreadable forms of extraction, contractually permitted and ever-increasing monitoring, personalization and customization, continuous experimentation, commodification and control that effectively exile persons from their own behavior, while producing new markets for behavioral prediction and behavior modification. Surveillance capitalism challenges democratic norms that it's taken us centuries to achieve in this long history of citizenship. How did things go wrong? From the very beginning, Tim Berners-Lee, the inventor of the web, who distributed the code to the world, and my colleague, understood how the web would radically transform governments, businesses, and societies. He also envisioned that his invention could, in the wrong hands, become a destroyer of worlds. Nonetheless, Berners-Lee let the devil out of the box and has watched, to his dismay, what has gone wrong. What didn't he know when he let the devil out of the box? Now, we can tell a story, and we all know the story how this came about, how the web was designed and intended to help scientists exchange data across a rather obscure platform called the Internet, a version of which the United States military had been using since 1960. But owing to his decision to release the source code for free, to make the web an open and democratic platform for all, his brainchild quickly took on a life of its own. He imagined a world of civil exchange. He has said, "I thought people would be civil," with rules of participation. That's how scientists and the military interact. Instead, we have pornography, crime, fake news, global monoculture, universal surveillance, and targeted behavior modification. Why didn't the inventors know that their tools would be used for harm rather than to help humanity, to destroy citizenship rather than expand global citizenry? Something that was made for one situation and one group of people, or maybe 2 or 3 groups of people, was taken out of where it was made, the context and rules of that society, and put in another, very different uses and people. A device created to facilitate the exchange of data among scientists at CERN and all across the world, to exchange information for the military, was put into the big wide world, and they named it thus, the Wide World Web. The computer scientists committed a fatal but not uncommon error. They looked at themselves, only at themselves, and they built a world in which they would be comfortable, that they had a rather narrow blinders on, a rather narrow perspective, and they didn't really know much about people unlike themselves. That was something they seem not to have thought about. They thought that if computer scientists and high-energy physicists and the military can communicate so easily with this technology, if we can make connections so quickly, why shouldn't everybody be allowed to do this? But surely, it is obvious to anyone who has taken 5 minutes to look, not in the mirror, but at somebody else, that most people are not like high-energy physicists or like the American military. They are quite different. Those are very well-disciplined groups. They have clear goals and well-developed processes of communication that have taken years and years and years to develop. Their norms of behavior are clear and strong, but no one seems to have thought about that. Nobody seems to have thought that the rest of the world are not like high-energy physicists. So they let the devil out of the box. So what do we do now? In the short term, some people are suggesting that there are some possible fixes, and Berners-Lee is working on one. He is trying to decentralize the web in his new platform called Solid. There are those who advocate legal regulation. Not likely in the United States these days. I don't know. You've got a little now in the European Union with the new data law. And some advocate ethics boards for big surveillance of the companies to control what they do. This is important. These are possible. They are short-term fixes. They are not my topic. I'm a sociologist who studies law and who studies organization. I'm a teacher at MIT, and my expertise lies elsewhere. And my vision is for the longer term, for education for the future. And the answer that everyone gives us, tells us, and I heard yesterday and again today in these sessions, is that we must educate more ethical and moral engineers and computer scientists. There are increasing calls for the teaching of ethics as part of both undergraduate and professional education at MIT and at elsewhere. And the story being told, however, about ethics, to me, as I said, is disturbingly common and banal, and it is wrong-headed. It is not going to work unless it becomes something different than its usual formula. The particular hazards of the internet are new. They are new. But the problem of professional blindness and inability to see beyond what is familiar is not new. Since the last quarter of the 19th century, we have had in the United States and in Europe repeated crises of technological and professional failures, with each chapter from the industrialists of the early 19th and 20th century to the disastrous decisions of World War I and to the financial crisis of 2008, one professional and technological failure after another. We have reports of increasing scientific and medical fraud. And the current financial debacle is no different. And the current technological disaster is no different for the hacking of democracy in Britain, in the United States, and it is going on in Europe at this very time. But although these are old problems and they keep repeating, we get the same answer to how to solve it. Educate better. Educate for ethical responsibility and specifically train those professionals in ethics as part of their education. For example, there are people calling when a bridge falls down. Well, we should have engineering schools do more to prepare students for the ethical challenges so that bridge doesn't fall down. Or Silicon Valley. We need a code of ethics, says the Atlantic Monthly, to prepare the computer scientists for more thoughtful decisions when they are confronted with dilemmas that involve conflicts between competing goods, to help them make choices that are better reflecting their values. Well, that's the problem. They are reflecting their values. The internet reflects the values of Silicon Valley. It does not reflect other people's values. It reflects their values. They do not understand the values of other people who are unlike themselves, how others might act and use their technologies. The pundits and the internet gurus recommend new courses in ethics. Get the students to reflect on their personal choices. So the standard model of these classes doesn't work because the diagnosis of what is wrong and the cure have the same misconception. The misconception is that professional, organizational, technological failures are problems caused by a few bad apples, some few weak, uninformed, misguided individuals independently making a poor choice. It is narrated as a story of a few rotten apples who give the barrel, technology, the internet, a bad name. We don't have to worry. It's just Mark Zuckerberg or Sheryl Sandberg. The rest is okay. Such bad apple narratives tell us that we need not worry about increasing evidence of financial misconduct, of student cheating, of scientific fraud, or the topic for today, digitized threats for liberal democracy. Because we don't need to worry, because the grand narrative, the big story, is we have well-functioning institutions. The market works, meritocratic higher education, digital connectivity. These are all terrific. We just have to worry about a few individuals. The repeated episodes of decisions that go bad and fail technology suggest that this conventional solution, teach more ethics, doesn't work, because that is the standard solution in most professional schools, and it has been for decades. Yet financiers, lawyers, doctors, scientists, computer scientists, they pursue their individual interests to the detriment of the public. So perhaps it's time to shift our attention to the organization of the barrel. In conventional ethics, and in the popular accounts of misconduct, each of these examples, whether it's Enron or the bridge failing or what's wrong with Facebook, these are explained as an anecdote, just a particular little story. And such anecdotes obscure the connection of one event to the next event to the next event. The social organization that arranges the individual cases into a structure of action we call digital warfare or surveillance capitalism or social disintegration is suppressed. It's overwhelmed by the exclusive focus on individual motive and individual fault. How is this relevant for teaching ethics? Rather than thinking about ethics as a series of anecdotes, of individual stories, individual persons, individual apples, we might think about ethics as participation in a moral culture, and then ask what that culture supports or challenges. What are the transactions among cultural members? What are the communicated messages? How often and for how long? And thus, how is that culture learned? How is the system of incentives and rewards organized? What is the structure of resources and rewards? Although the studying culture is the adopted subject of many disciplines today, and one can hear it in engineering as well, sociology and anthropology specifically take as their topic to trace the links, how one joins another and another, how they are connected, how the particular events are examples of something general, and what the mechanisms are for aggregating and collecting individual actions into collectivities and as a circulating culture. From this perspective, we might think of the task of ethics education as sociocultural analysis or preparation for a career as a computer scientist as something that requires lessons in history, lessons in organization, lessons in cultural exploration and management. Ethics education needs to be historical, contextualized, attention to the situation in which you are, exactly what was missing when the web was created and moved from high energy physicists and the military to everyone. This analysis must include attention to what happens in particular situations and to identify the logic that is in that place and those people. Ethics in education needs to ask how the internet worked for science and for the military and how it is now different. Preparation for a career in science, for example, might include attention to the organization of laboratories, including perhaps how they have changed over time, perhaps how they are funded, who pays for what research, what different kinds of funding lead to different kinds of research, as well as the role of gender in group and professional activities. How come the CEO of Axion in the speech before this put up pictures only of men, no women, no people of color, while he was telling everybody to be more moral and to be more inclusive? He said that, but he didn't do that. Preparation for a career in computer science might pay special attention to the historical examples of technological catastrophe and the transformation of technologies into systems of social control and power. In some of our research, we refer to these kinds of accounts, which I'm suggesting ought to be the subject of education, as subversive stories, liberatory stories, narratives that subvert and undermine claims of individual causality or of great men doing great things by revealing how social organization link the particular and the general. Subversive stories reveal the patterns of aggregation through systems of opportunity and reward, as well as constraints on freedom. For a moment, we might imagine you could repair this traditional story of a bad apple, of an individual narrative, by adopting a little modification. Suppose we change the story of a few bad apples to maybe some bad apples, maybe lots of bad apples. That's not going to survive, and that won't do good enough. As long as we are describing apples, we have preserved the system, a set of practices, ideas, and cultural resources that support misconduct. We have helped to tell what we might call a hegemonic tale, a story that buries and hides the social organization of action, of incentives, and of power, and that absolves everybody of responsibility. If we talk about ethics as individual decision-making, without history, without context, without social structure and culture, we have not explained how the organization of apples in the barrel is part of why we see only individual bad apples, and how those bad apples can infect other apples. What are the mechanisms of infection and spread? This is the missing structural element that conventional accounts of ethics as bad apples usually miss, and an alternative approach to ethics education and responsibility might offer. When a curriculum lacks solid grounding in organizational and institutional analysis, it encourages hyper-individualism, hyper-careerism, which may be characteristic of American culture, but is clearly spreading everywhere else. And it reflects the preferences of Silicon Valley population. Rather than provide students with subversive stories and the tools for critical inquiry, the curriculum inadvertently perhaps becomes a vehicle for reinforcing popular ideologies. The popular view is that history is just a series of individual decisions by some few great men, a series of particularly special and delicious apples, perhaps some attention to which trees grow better apples, the better university, a little bit here or there, but little attention to the organization of the orchard. Okay? Last week, I spoke in a class at MIT on engineering ethics. I was asked to come in and explain to the students how I thought they could be more moral and ethical engineers. And so I asked them, why are you making autonomous cars? Why are you spending your time worrying about whether the car will hit the pregnant lady or the trolley car? And that's what they spend their time worrying about, and writing algorithms to solve that problem, which philosophers have been unable to solve for over 100 years. It doesn't have a solution, but that's what they spend their time doing. And I said, again, why are you making autonomous cars? And they couldn't answer me. And I said, because it's fun. And they said, yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you very much for these alerts. There is a lot of people here in the audience that works on technologies. Hope there's no bad apple here. So we'll move on, and we'll go to another subject with Sarah Harmon. She's country manager of LinkedIn in Spain and Portugal. She was also named one of the top 100 women in Spain and the most Zen CEO in 2018. I'm very jealous of that. And she has a broad experience in technology and business management. Please take the stage.
Bon dia.
Bon dia.
I'm a little intimidated following Susan, especially since I kind of represent that Silicon Valley evil empire. And a big data company nonetheless, right? LinkedIn is the biggest professional network in the world. We have almost 600 million members out of the 3 billion professionals in the world, 3 million of which are here in Portugal. And our mission is actually to make those professionals more successful and more productive. So one of the reasons why most people worked at LinkedIn is because they really identify actually with our purpose. And we actually have a vision in 10 years, and that vision in 10 years is to digitize the whole global economy so that we can actually tell governments and schools what jobs are going to be needed for the future. And my topic today is really relevant to that because we've seen all the studies. We've seen how many jobs are going to be destroyed by automation and AI. I was talking with Daniel earlier before the presentation. There was a McKinsey study launched here that more than 1 million jobs in Portugal alone are going to be destroyed over the next few years by robots or automation. And when I started thinking about my topic, I actually thought about an industry that is really relevant not only in Portugal, but in Spain, both territories that I cover. And the story has to do with a colleague of mine named Ali. And Ali was flying to Singapore, and it was one of those really long flights, and he got there really late. And Ali is a guy who just has to have dinner at night. He has to. He can't go to bed with an empty stomach. And he was really worried. He was looking at his watch in the taxi, and he was, telling the taxi driver to go faster, and because he wanted dinner before he went to bed. And so he checked in, and he ran up to the room, and he called room service. He was just in time to call room service. And on the other end of the line was a robot taking his order. All the menu was had numbers on it, and he put the numbers in, and he ordered his salad and his Diet Coke, and he hung up the phone. 30 minutes later, the phone rings again. And a voice on the other end of the line, an automatic voice said, "Good evening, Mr. Matar. If you've ordered a Caesar salad and a Diet Coke, please open your door." So Ali hangs up the phone, walks over to the door and opens the door, and what he finds is this. And this robot says to him, "Good evening, Mr. Matar. My name is Rosie. Did you order a Caesar salad and a Diet Coke? If you did, please press the green button." Ali pressed the green button, a door opened, and out came a tray with his Caesar salad and his Diet Coke. Ali took the tray. Rosie said, "I wish you a pleasant evening." She turned around and she rolled right back to the elevator. The elevator opened, Rosie went into the elevator and was gone. That got me thinking about the tourism industry. Do you know that Spain and Portugal and Poland are the top 3 countries in the European Union with temporary jobs, with the most temporary workers, over 30%. People on temporary contracts, people who come in and out of the workforce. And it got me thinking about the gig economy and, what special, we always think, oh, those jobs will never be replaced by robots, but we have another example, don't we? I don't know how many people saw this in the news last week. This is the hotel in Japan called Henna. They actually decided to put 250 or so robots into the hotel to serve pretty much all of the jobs. They thought they could automate all the jobs in that hotel. A few years later, they decided that experiment had failed. It did not help the human employees, the few that were working there, and it didn't reduce costs. And that's principally why we go to automation and why we go to AI, because we think we can automate tasks that maybe humans don't want to do anymore, or we can make them more cost efficient. But it didn't work. Now, one of the things that I find curious about this study is that there wasn't a whole lot of complaints from the humans that were interacting with these robots. These are the concierges, by the way, guys. I don't know what genius thought that velociraptors, anybody who's seen Jurassic Park, like velociraptors would be good customer service agents? Genius. They had a really hard time copying passports, the velociraptors. Short arms, right? Anyway, at LinkedIn, and usually I don't travel with notes, but last night we actually published the top 5 jobs, that are actually gaining more momentum in our economy today. The first one is blockchain developer. The second one is machine learning engineer. The third one is application sales executive. The fourth one is machine learning specialist. And the fifth one is professional medical representative. 3 of those have to do with automation, artificial intelligence, machine learning. Those are the jobs, and they have grown, in the case of blockchain developer, by 33 times since last year. The skills that are most demanded these days are typically tech skills. But the other thing that we also studied in the same study is, what can humans do to accompany this trend? And we just got back from Davos, right? And I just published actually a post from a Manpower executive last night that talked about his one takeaway from Davos this year. And he said he has never heard so many executives talk about how humans and robots can work together and what we can do to make sure that we don't leave so many people behind. What can governments do? What can universities do? What can companies do in order to make sure that humans are accompanying robots? And what's really curious is if we look at the skills, and I hate calling them soft skills, but they're the skills that actually humans provide that a robot can't, like creativity, persuasion, collaboration, adaptability, time management. Maybe time management a robot can do, but if you look at those skills, those are the things that we also need to be talking to our students about. And I agree with Susan on many cases that we also need to be talking about, yes, we can do it, but should we do it? Right? Should we do it? And so when we talk about whether or not a robot's going to take your job, we can also talk about whether it's going to find you your next job and how we can actually make that connection between opportunity and the skills and experience that you have in order to find your next opportunity. Now, anybody here in the recruiting industry, anybody hire people? Anybody hire people here? People managers? What's the hardest thing about hiring people? One, today in tech skills, it's finding the right people, right? Finding the right people. We have a skills gap. Everybody's competing for the same talent, et cetera, et cetera. Sourcing is one of the biggest problems. And it's also one of the biggest places where we have the most data. Therefore, it's very susceptible to automation and to artificial intelligence. The other thing that recruiters don't have a lot of is time. So where robots or chatbots or AI, machine learning, where it can help us in sourcing, first is giving us data to figure out where that good talent is. If we don't have the talent here, geographically, where can we find it? And where can we find diverse talent? That's one of the things LinkedIn is actually looking at right now, is trying to make sure that when you try to go for a role or you're hiring a role, that you actually are having a diverse panel of candidates for that particular role. It can also make the search more proactive. So it will know when Sarah is looking for a blockchain developer, it'll know what kind of culture fit, what kind of person Sarah is looking for, what kind of school she typically looks at, what geographies. It will learn and it will start presenting candidates to me even when I'm not doing a search. It will be proactive instead of me having to actually go out and search. And then if we look at the candidate experience, we can look at chatbots. So one of the biggest reasons why candidates don't apply is insecurity about whether or not they have the right skills or not. They're just like customers. They abandon, the process of actually applying for a job. There's quite a big abandonment rate because actually applying for jobs is tough, right? And some applications are hard. And so there will be actually AI that will coach candidates through that process and make sure that you don't have such a high abandonment rate. It will also proactively look for those candidates. It will put your jobs in front of the right candidates. It will learn what kind of candidates you want. It will search the web and find those candidates that you need for your jobs before you even have the need, trying to anticipate what you will be needing in the future. Now, this has a dark side. We also just published a study that we released in Davos this year that when we look at artificial intelligence professionals in the world, 78% of those jobs are covered by men. 22% are covered by women. 78% by men, 22% by women. Now, I'm not saying men are bad. I'm saying we all have unconscious biases. And if there's only one population that is writing those algorithms and writing those scripts, then unfortunately, we're going to find ourselves in a situation where there's bias. It's just the way sociologically that people work. A lot of it, and that's why it's called unconscious bias. We don't know, right, what biases we have. So what can you do as a candidate to potentially combat that situation? The first thing I want to talk about, I'm going to skip this since we're running out of time, is you need to make sure that you have some sort of digital footprint, folks. I'm not going to ask everybody who has a profile on LinkedIn, but when we start talking about the global gig economy and we start talking about automatic sourcing, artificial intelligence, if you put your name into Google today and nothing comes up, you have a big problem professionally. Almost 30% of headhunters and sourcers look only on the internet for their candidates or on a mobile application. If you don't have a profile, and if you are over 40, God help you. You have to have a digital presence today, unless we change the barrel. You have to have a digital presence today. You have to make sure that that digital presence is visible. You need to set up a Google alert around your name. You need to make sure that you are looking at profiles of things that you want to do in the future, and your profile matches, and you are learning constantly about how to get to that particular place. There's a ton of information, and we talk about, video interviews and career planning. I can imagine a day when you will ask Siri, tell me more about Microsoft. I want to work as a blockchain developer at Microsoft. Tell me what skills I need, and Siri will be able to tell you. I can see a day where a robot will be your career coach. It will go around the internet, look at all of the profiles of the people at Microsoft that are blockchain developers and say, that's great, Sarah. All these developers, the most common skills they have is this, and you don't have it. But here's a course you can take in order to get that skill. It'll be like shopping on Amazon. or wherever you shop digitally. And then video interviews. One of these things I want you to be very careful about is making sure that you prepare well for these video interviews, because this is going to be another data point. Make sure they're professional. It's just like a photo, guys. Make sure it's professional. Make sure that you are prepared for those interviews, and make sure that you know that it eventually will become part of your digital footprint, and that it's going to become more and more common, and it will become part of your profile. And I would actually say to you, put a video interview up on your profile. It's really engaging. It's a great way to kind of game the system in terms of machine learning and artificial, because those things are actually prioritized in algorithms. Put up your own video interview. Take control of your own future. So I've talked a lot, again, about all of these things that are going to happen in the world, and that the robot may be coming to take your job. But I want to remind you again that when Microsoft and LinkedIn went out and looked at the skills that most companies were missing today, the top 3 were attitude skills, not aptitude skills. Oral communication, what I'm doing now. Leadership, collaboration. And one of the biggest ones is creativity. And so I'm going to leave my final word with an android that kind of speaks to that. Or maybe not.
I'm faster than you. I'm stronger than you. Certainly, I will last much longer than you. You may think I am the future, but you're wrong. You are. If I had a wish, I'd wish to be human. To know how it feels. To feel. To hope. To despair. To wonder. To love. I can achieve immortality by not wearing out. You can achieve immortality simply by doing one great thing.
Obrigada.
Very nice videos, Sarah. Thank you very much. Now we have a big challenge, and Danielle and João will have this challenge. It's all on you because I'm the moderator, so the challenge is not mine. To comment on these 2 presentations, and I would like to ask you to, of course, the vision from Susan is kind of scary, but it's transforming the way we are moving on this, not thinking of an evil empire or thinking of, you decide, but the way we manage the information that we have, the way we manage the way that we move on the digital space and on the not digital space, so on an analogical space. One of the message I think is not to leave our humanity behind, and this has to be also trained. This has to be engaged in our way we move, the way we talk to other people, the way we work. Danielle, what do you think about this?
Hi, thank you for the invitation to being here. And let's try to be short. I think we're living in a time of dramatic change, and in times of dramatic change, chaos happens. And sometimes things don't work out the way we expect them to be. When we moved from into agricultural times, when we moved from being nomads to agricultural times, and we started raising pigs and eating stuff that we were growing, we started getting sick, we started getting diseases. None of that happened when we were moving around all the time. And I'm sure that lots of people, when we started sort of getting sick because we were raising pigs and pigs were passing on their problems to human beings, they're like, why are we raising pigs? And yet we did it. And then we did it through agriculture, and we moved on and on and on. And so I think there's a point in what Susan says, which is, yes, sometimes things go a little bit faster, but the fact is that they do. And this is the way human beings go. And you know, evil empires, they exist all over. You can call them what you want, but people are driven by this drive. And we need to find ways to actually create a new society. I think the biggest challenge is how, and coming back towards the end of Susan's talk, is how do you create a new society that can cope with all the technology that's around us? And if you think of society has this problem, which is you're always bound between this paradox of we try to be friends, we try to cooperate. At the same time, we try to exploit each other and to make money out of each other and to conquer each other and to have more power over each other. And how do you actually, what are the tools that allow you in every society with the technology that exists, allow you to balance this paradox between our need to be in a society and to cooperate with each other and to respect each other, but also our basic human instincts of actually looking to overcome other people, steal from other people. And so what are the challenges as we move forward? Three things that I'd like to mention. One is search for meaning. Okay, I think we are in a society with all this ability of having meanings that are far away and always moving around. We're all looking for what it means. So purpose, meaning, sort of what it is that builds our society. You know, religion can certainly not provide us meaning in this world that's changing so fast. So how are we going to bring to kids, to not so kids, this notion of I live in this society and I'm building something that means something for me, that gives me a sense of joy of actually participating in this. I think we're lost in there. And I think we need to really make progress in there.
Danielle, as an educator, do you think that we can provide that through education or through formal education, or should we focus more on the education from the family and not only provide it on college, on universities and schools?
I think it's schools. I think it's families. I think it's clubs. I think it's anything that we do. I mean, we learn every single time that we're out and we're interacting with other people. So, and by the way, now we think about schools, but new things may come up. You know, we may create just clubs where people go and hang out when they have nothing to do. We may have clubs where kids play on PS4 and they talk to each other there, right? So how are we going to that space? How are we going to master that space? So all this is new, and all this needs new rules, and all this needs new ways of working. So I think meaning it matters. A second thing are institutions, and this is the point that Susan was mentioning. So there's going to be a big thing now, which is going to be antitrust. So how is antitrust going to deal with Facebook and Google? So we have no idea how that's going to play out, and we need to rethink the way our capitalist society gets organized, in that context. So again, meaning institutions. Institutions for these companies and even the political institutions need to be rethought, and the skills that individual people need to have to survive in this society. Now we come back to Susan's point, which is when you are in the old society where things were more or less robotic, I mean, where humans were robots in the end, right? In the old society, you look at Charlie Chaplin's movie, we're turning things. So in the old society, the skills that you needed to have to survive were basically, if you turn the screw, you succeed. Your company takes you in, you turn the screw for your entire life, you retire, and you have an easy, comfortable life. That's over. And now we come to now you're going to move between jobs, you're going to move between places, you're going to move between societies. And so even the way we train ourselves for that new society, which means that we need to learn about history, we need to learn about society in general, about the barrel, coming back to this point. We need to understand the barrel instead of understanding what is our place within that barrel, because we're always shifting around in that barrel, right? So I think what we need to do to sum up is three things that we need to work with is meaning, why are we here? What are we trying to build individually as a society? Two, how are institutions, our society going to be reorganized in this world of platforms? And three, how am I as an individual going to have the skills to survive? How do I leverage LinkedIn? How do I interact with other people? How do I build trust with individuals that I don't even know? And I think once we do those three things, and it's going to take a while, once we do those three things, we're going to have a new society that can actually bring progress in the world of the digital age.
Thank you very much, Danielle. There's a very interesting point of view, and the purpose is very important, I think, and not finding a way to continuously interact and not to isolate yourself as a bad apple or not, even if you are a good apple. João, you are executive director of the firm Startup Portugal, so I think that, of course, you can comment on, but can you also talk about the way startups can manage on this environment, because startups have a great challenge. They have to be competitive, and being competitive must be on an ethical and moral way, but at the same time they have to compete with others that are not ethical and moral. This is a dilemma, and how can you see that?
It's amazing what's been happening in the last couple of years. We now have over 50 different platforms for temporary jobs and gigs, and that helps a lot the economy and the startups to move forward, especially if you are in a very early stage. So we see nowadays, we've pushed startups pretty much from a culture of Silicon Valley to do MVPs and to try their products very quick, very fast, and fail fast. And the gig economy helps a lot these startups to move forward in that sense. But it also created a couple of dark sides to the system. So we see some of these startups, when they become big, they do not hire the people to internalize them as workers. They actually keep them on the gig economy, and that creates an unfair society. So many of the rights that our predecessors fought for us to have in terms of job security, healthcare, and retirement things, those will go away with the gig economy. So there's an ethical side to look into as a manager of a startup. Do you actually keep profit above everything, or do you actually integrate your community into your company and have a more long-term perspective on things? This also has created one of the things that will contribute to what Danielle was saying, that they say about in 2030, about 40% of the workforce will be included in this gig economy. That means some of the things we start to seeing emerging in Portugal, for instance, we are considered to be on the top 5 of the safest countries in the world, and not by us, but by independent entities such as Forbes and others. And we are considered to be the best country in the world to live as an expat, which means that we have a lot of digital nomads lying around and living around. And they choose Portugal for many different reasons, for being more economic, for having good weather, for being safe, and so on and so on. These people work as much as they need for their income, the income they need, which makes it kind of, let's see what's going to happen with all these jobs that are going to be replaced by AI and robotics, because some of these people might not work the full-time 40 hours a week jobs. They will use the resources that they need. This relies that there is a cultural hack, as we mentioned, about the whole needs and use and resources used, because if you are working without an employer, then you might not work the full-time job that was available, and that will come to the 3 days a week work time, and that will create jobs that weren't there before, with a plus that you will only be doing what you actually love to do. The market is global. The challenge, it's also balanced between what other countries and people from other countries will be doing in a global competition market. So it's a very challenging environment. In terms of what we also see happening right now for startups, it has a lot to do with new skills and new training, because this gig economy changes really quickly, and as we mentioned before, the skills are being updated every year. It's very easy for you to be squeezed out of the market because your skills are not on the top hiring list, so you'll be squeezed out of competencies and skills that are on demand. That means that in the future, we will have to save time to train ourselves like we do for saving time to get hired by companies. We will have to retrain ourselves every year to be constantly moving with the technology and with the needs of the new technology developments. But I really respect what Susan said. It's up to us to decide what the barrel will be of the job market in the future. Decide for us as CEOs and people who are starting new projects, what do we really want to do as the future? Because if we decide that the rules of engagement with our workforce are just for profit and make it more easy and deregulated, in the future we might face challenges for the whole society.
Don't you think the challenges are already here? Because we see a lot of bad behavior with these gig economy people, or well, we can call it freelancers or something like that. In one way, it's good for them because they can move around and they can do what they want, but on the future, they don't have the sustainability. Yes, and even sometimes they can do it for some time, but they cannot do it for long because they need some predictability on their jobs. They need to have planned for future.
I think that we see mainly two big cohorts. We see startups and companies, tech companies that have built their model based on a deregulated workforce, and we see that in deliveries, we see that in drivers, we see that in different areas of economic, and we see that also in tourism and housing. And that might be the less good side of it. And we see other companies who use very specific skills to ramp up their products, but then they have to leave it. Like a small startup who needs an MBA to decide the strategy for the future, or a very, very good person to decide their big campaign to launch, they can't pay them for the full year. They can't pay them for and it's not intended. It's intended for that specific moment for a very high level of skills. The problem is that the other companies who have to scale their workforce, but they're doing by gig economy, I suspect, as we've seen it with big operators of transports, that we will see the dark side of that for their strategies. We're starting to see companies who have a lot of drivers to have their own internal marketing campaigns to keep them happy, to have a lot of community managers to manage the communities because they are not willing to participate as the company wanted. So there's also a huge risk for startups and companies and tech companies who go down this way of from one day to another to lose all their workforce because people are not up to it, and that's collapse.
Yeah, Danielle, you wanted to comment on something?
I wanted to comment on this because
we are running short of time.
So I'll be very short. You know, I want to disagree. So we're gonna have to
so you want to disagree? Okay.
I think we are constantly using 20th century mindsets to look at the problems of the 21st century. If you think of what João was just saying, oh, you people want to be security, they want all these, they want security for life and all these kinds of things. I mean, this is a new world. I mean, many of these companies need that flexibility to survive. Many of these companies need that flexibility to be able to react, to remain agile. That's the reality of it. So what is the problem? The problem is that we know that if we don't have a long-term contract, you cannot go into a bank and get a loan, because without that long-term contract, you're going to get a loan. So the problem is not the job. The problem is the way we get the loan. So we need to rethink the institutions so that how can we actually create, so social security. So and every time we reform the laws with the mindset of the economy of the 20th century.
Sustainability,
right?
Yeah.
It's not. It's people are going to move around. That's the way the young people want. That's the way volatility in the labor market expects people to move. And what we need to do is redesign. This is the institution's point I'm saying. We need to redesign Social Security. We redesign the way banks work. We need to redesign the way we take our identity cards, proof of residence. We need to redesign all this stuff for what is the new economy. If we don't do this, we're lagging behind, and we're going to create a society that is going to be breakdown. That's the institutions element I was mentioning before.
Yeah. Thank you, Susan. Susan. This is a more profound question than just gig economy. Where the theme of the debate is that, but you've mentioned a lot of specific problems. But do you think there is with gig economy this higher risk of this isolation and this transformation?
So the problem, I agree with just about everything everybody has said. And Sarah's last point about the skills that companies say they need now, these human skills, which are the ability to keep learning, to communicate, to have empathy. And Danielle's point about we need institutions appropriate for a different kind of gig economy. The problem is that human bodies haven't sufficiently changed enough, despite my titanium leg, okay, that we have temporal needs, and there are going to be people dispossessed until we get the new institutions. I am worried. I'm not a futurist. I can't predict. I am worried we will not be given the time to have those institutional changes which take longer. I am truly worried, and maybe in this case I speak as an American who is undergoing a profound dissolution of what was supposed to be the most successful democracy in history. You know, we've been in bad places before. We had a civil war, but it's not clear that we can get the institutional changes.
On at least on the short time that we need.
What we need in order to accommodate it. Exactly. Yeah. I think that the temporal speeds are out of whack, but I agree.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Sarah, what do you think of this?
I absolutely agree with Susan and with everybody on the panel. I really don't think our institutions are keeping up. And, you know, one of the principal areas where our institutions aren't keeping up is in our educational systems all over the world, which is, you know, one of the reasons why LinkedIn is trying to publish all these reports, trying to be the canary in the coal mine, saying this is where these are. It's not every year, João, that the skills change. It's every 6 months that the top skills that we are publishing, saying these are the top 25 skills that we need today, and they change. 50% of those come off the list every 6 months. One of the things I think that gives me just a bit of hope is 75% of our workforce by 2020 is going to be millennials, and Generation Z is entering the workforce very soon. They already know. Like Daniel said, they've already got the mindset. The institutions haven't kept up, but they already have the mindset. And everybody says millennials killed beer, millennials killed cars, millennials killed home loans, millennials killed everything. But it's not that they killed it. They're practical. They know they probably may not ever own a house because maybe they can't get the loan because the institutions aren't keeping up. But one of the things that gives me hope is that when we look at what these workers want, either in gig employment or full-time employment, obviously, it's compensation, but other things are starting to rise up in the list. I want this company to have a sense of social responsibility. I want to believe in the CEO of this company. I want to believe that this company is doing something good in the world. They're investing their money. When they invest money, they invest in companies that they feel have some sort of social benefit, social interest. That gives me hope. It's not all of them, guys. Some of us are mercenary, but some of us aren't. But it's got to be a bigger portion of the population than the ones that are mercenary, because those things that people are looking for are actually starting to show up on our top 5 list.
Can I give some content to that to agree? And then if you ask the students at MIT and the millennials, what is the substantive thing that they care about the most? It's climate change.
Climate change.
That which we are not dealing with, because everything else is going to be moot if we don't do something about that.
Yeah, the changes are all over, and in fact, what Sarah said about the way the people want to believe in the company where they work for, even are they contractors or are they gig economy or so on. I think it's very important, and it's the move that we see. We could be here talking all day about this. It's true that we didn't focus on that much of gig economy and culture hacking, but this is all the substance of the things that is changing, and it's transforming the way we work and the way we relate with companies and relate with other people in the society. So I ask for a great applause for these great speakers. Thank you very much.